There's no one answer to that. So I think a lot of people will get into it because of that, because they just see it as the next step.
Is that a good motivation though?
So again, you can kind of get that little step without doing that full commitment.
Do you have your own ways of how you like to approach one-to-ones?
I quite like informal one-on-ones as a general rule. Most of the time, people are quite receptive to getting that feedback if it's given in a good way. Learning to get good at that is going to make you a better leader.
It's more about really explaining them the whys and allowing the team to think about the hows.
If you don't have an appreciation of what's different about that person's role compared to what yours are, you're probably going to try and meet them on the same level that you are.
Welcome back everyone to another episode of Mastering Tech Growth. Today we have Robbie Clutton, who's a fractional CTO, which pretty much does anything engineering related. We have a very interesting topic today. So we're going to be discussing a fictional character who currently is an individual contributor and would like to transition to leadership role. We will talk how one would actually make that decision, how that transition looks like, and what is most likely waiting for you in the first year in that new role of being leader of people. Welcome, Robbie.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So, Robbie, give us who you are, how did you end up in tech, and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so hi, Robbie Clutton. Been in the business sort of 20 years. Did a degree in software engineering. Worked at BT, telephone company, making phones ring and doing some cloud stuff. Worked for a small digital agency and then the Guardian newspapers. Had a chance to work in New York. Joined a company called Pivotal Labs. Was there for 9 years, all told. And that's where I started my management journey. So I was joined as an engineer and then moved up into first line manager and helping to run that New York consultancy practice. Moved back to the UK, took over kind of running our UK business and then our EMEA business. So dealing with people in UK, Germany, France, Netherlands, Ireland, and a few other people kind of dotted around. Went through acquisitions, IPOs, spin outs, another acquisition before kind of coming into 2020, pandemic, being acquired by VMware, which was a great company to work for, but at 35,000 people, kind of felt like wasn't really what I was looking for at that moment in time. Joined a developer security company called Sneak as a senior director, moved up into VP, and then got made redundant in 2022 and kind of figured, I've been working for 19 years. I've at least got another 19 years left. If I don't do something different now, when am I ever going to do it? And decided to start my own business. And I've been doing this kind of fractional CTO job. So I've, have some clients where I work a few days a week. I'm doing some coaching, some advising, some small projects, some kind of classroom-based teaching. So yeah, just kind of, trying to do my own thing. And I'm enjoying it so far.
It's good you are. And it does seem that this gig economy and that fractional approach is actually becoming quite popular. I'm not like tracking the numbers, but just people around me seems to be favoriting that fractional setup. Is that do you have any because you're doing this for quite some time now? Is that when it comes to the trade-off? Because you had the big gigs and not gigs, but big permanent roles in big companies, smaller ones, and then you have this fractional. Like your take, like what's the trade-off?
I think for me, and I imagine for a lot of people, this is kind of a consequence of the pandemic. And before the pandemic, I was traveling a lot for my role. I kind of already mentioned, traveling to Europe almost every other week. I was traveling to the US a couple of times a year. My kids were a bit younger there, so I kind of really felt like I was starting to miss out a little bit on them, and wanted to do something different. And then lockdown came along, so that kind of fixed that. But I think lockdown was quite good for me and my family, and it kind of gave the opportunity to have that reset and rethink about, well, what do I actually want to do with the career and how much time I want to spend at home. And I think doing this kind of fractional job and running an independent business plays into that really, really well. Because it really means that you're in control of your own destiny. You take on the clients that you want to take on. You take on the amount of work that you want to take on, and you work when you want to work. So that works really well for me. My kids are still in school, and they're young, so they're in primary school, so they're 9 and 6. So during sort of school holidays, it's very easy for me to dial down the work so I can be with them over the holidays. It's very easy, if they need a day off, they're not very well, I can kind of dial that kind of down. That balance has really shifted, and that being an independent consultant and fractional part of being a big part of that has really enabled me to do that.
It's good to hear. The one question which was going in my head, Rob, is like, what happens if you don't find any leads? Like, what happens if you don't find any clients?
Yeah.
Did you walk into that with like a bunch of contacts you had, and you knew that work will come?
No. It was a bit of a roll of the dice. So I got made redundant October 22. So this was the year of the interest rates and Ukraine war. So lots of redundancies across the industry, and a lot of companies just weren't really hiring. So needed to kind of do something different. But because of redundancy and because I'd kind of gone through IPOs and things, like I had a little bit of a financial runway, not loads, can't retire, but had a bit of a safety net. My wife works as well. We kind of looked at our finances and kind of figured, well, we could do this for a little while. And then found work quite quickly. Not straight away, but quite quickly. And that kind of built up a bit of capital in the business. So here in the UK, you have to have your own legal entity and your own business bank account. So that's kind of all going into there, and really try to be quite disciplined about finances. And I pay myself a smallish wage, like what's the smallest I can kind of get away with, but while I build up my business bank account, so that even if I have a quiet month, I've still got money in my business bank account, so I can still pay myself every month in a predictable way. There is a bit of a resetting of kind of expectations and potentially lifestyle, and maybe I don't need 5 TV streaming services. Maybe I can just live with with 3 of them.
What do you mean? You need all of them? Disney, Netflix.
I've slowly added them all back in because
here you go.
This show is on that one, so I really want to see that. But trying to be a bit more disciplined, and it's worked out. It's worked out quite well. But never say never. Right now it's okay. But who knows? Who knows in the future?
I'm sure you'll do great, and with that background and everything you can offer to startups and coaching and mentoring and everything you bring to the table, it is that lead part, marketing, sales. It does maybe change a little bit how your life looks like, but again, change is never bad, right?
And I think one of the things which I was looking for was not a necessarily kind of a full-time job as a contractor or as a permanent and doing the same thing every day. I wanted this portfolio life. I'd been hearing about this portfolio life, and I was like, I think I want that. So right now, I'm doing some coaching, I'm doing some advising. I've just done some classroom kind of activities, doing some fractional work. So I've got a portfolio. So if one of them goes away, I've still got other work and other revenue, and one will go away, the revenue will come down, but hopefully it'll be replaced. But it's not this kind of binary, like I'm working or I'm not. It's like I'm kind of always working. It's a dial now rather than sort of a binary on or off.
Okay, I absolutely see that. Right. So thanks for this. So we know who Robbie is now. We got some social proof, of your knowledge and skills, right?
Yeah.
So let's set the scene, right? So we have our fictional character, let's call him James Bond, just for a giggles.
Yeah.
So we have James. He's the best at his team right now. He's individual contributor, he's a back-end developer, again, for the sake of argument, and he's the guy who everybody goes to. So he has all the answers naturally, he's a senior. He's been doing this for maybe 5, maybe 10 years now. And without really noticing or understanding himself, he started, realizing that he's coaching people and all these things. And now, he wants to advance his career and things like team leads, something maybe more is playing with his head. So in your experience, Robbie, like how one does really decides to become a leader of people?
Yeah. So I think there are some people who do it for good reasons and some people who do it for not particularly good reasons. And some people think they want to do it, and then it turns out that they actually don't. once they've experienced it, and some people who don't really want to do it, and then when they experience it, they actually really like it. So there's no one answer to that. I think there are patterns though. So we talk about some of the patterns, and I think one of them is just this notion of progression, right? Like, I want to get promoted. What's the next step? And what, at some point, as a technical person, maybe it's changing a little bit now, but there was a point where it's like I can get to sort of a senior level, but if I want to go more than that, then I have to start taking over manager responsibilities. Or I have to be a team lead. I have to start managing people. That is the well-trodden path, right? I have to go down that if I want continuous career progression. So I think a lot of people will get into it because of that, because they just see it as the next step. I think there are some companies, and some probably do it better than others. And again, I think this is maybe a bit more of a sort of recent thing, people doing more of it. You can stay on the technical track, and go from like a senior to a staff to a principal and beyond, and stay and develop those technical skills without taking on the team lead or people management responsibilities. But it's still not as well a trodden path, I think, as like next thing is a team lead, next thing is people management. So I think that's kind of the first pattern. It's like it's just the well-trodden path, right? It's just like this is what people have done before me. I'm at this company. I look at other people and how they've progressed their careers, and I'm just following in their footsteps. So that's one. I think probably a closely related aspect to that is compensation, right, and financial rewards. And I think rightly or wrongly, I think people assume, and it might be correct, that people get paid more as a team lead, as a manager, as a director. So it's like, if I want to kind of break through this glass ceiling of my earning potential, I have to take on these other responsibilities. Now you kind of have to ask those questions, like whether that person wants it or not, or whether they're right for it or not. But they kind of see that as the, like, I want to increase my earning potential, so I have to go down this path if I want to do that.
Yeah, continue, Robbie. Yep.
And I think the last one is, there are, I think, certain types of people who just sort of take on certain responsibilities within a team, not always being asked, but some of the things which are not necessarily the engineering tasks, right? Whether it's arranging a schedule, or doing release planning, or they're doing the things which might otherwise fall through the cracks, and they kind of start to assume some of those things, and they start to enjoy some of those things, and then they just take on more and more of those kind of responsibilities, until the point where it's like now it seems like an obvious next step would be, I want to formalize this, right? Now I should go into a team lead, I should go into a manager, because I'm kind of already doing it, right? So let's kind of formalize it. So I think those are probably the main patterns. There are probably others, but those are the ones which I certainly identify with, I think.
Yep. I think you nailed it. And so one question which instantly comes out is like, is that a good motivation though? We have these compensations, the influence building within the business. You want to lead people. Maybe you naturally sort of find yourself in that part, but is that like the right motivation? People should be making that judgment, because effectively you're getting lured in the potential career path, which maybe is not yours, right? So because you want that influence, you want that compensation, so you're getting sort of sucked into it. But then, as you said, people sometimes walk into that room and they go like, that's just not my environment. Like, I don't want to be doing this. And I actually have friends literally coming from that situation where they went into that team lead situation, and they were like, yeah, it's just not me. They took a step back and went back into, that hands-on path of just, deepening their domain knowledge. So if I'm like not sure if I want to be a team lead, like, do you have some tactical suggestions of how people could go through that decision-making process?
Yes, I think there's probably two things here, right? So one is like, before you take on any formal responsibility, right, like start looking for the informal ownership of things, right? So whether it's like, hey, we need to do, there's some activities which need to be done which are not like your normal 9 to 5, right? So if we just make an assumption that 80% of a person's job, 90%, 100% is like writing code as a software developer. Let's, forget those companies where they spend an awful lot of time in meetings. But if that is your job, there's other work which needs to happen around that, right? It could be release planning, could be quarterly planning, could be release planning, it could be hiring, could be interviewing, could be onboarding new people, could be looking at new tools. Like there are other things which need to happen. So you could look to sort of raise your hand and say, like, I'd like to get involved in that. I want to do some of those things. Internships are really good as well, right? If you've got someone coming in, it's like, oh, look, I'll be a buddy for the intern, right? They've got someone coming in for the summer or something. I can be their manager, I can be their thing, right? It's a limited amount of time. Maybe they're here for the summer, maybe 6 months or so. So you can kind of take on some of those responsibilities in a sort of time limited way. So this is an opportunity for you to start to get some experience and exposure to what it looks like, what those other activities are, because a lot of those things are what a manager would be doing, right, or a team leader would be doing. So you can kind of start to take some of those burdens off. And you could, like, if you've got a team leader or a manager, you can go and ask them, like, what are you doing that I could take off your hands? Could I help you with anything? Whether it could be pair on something, or could I do it for you, right? And then we can review it later. So I think that's the first thing, is right. It's like sampling. It's kind of try before you buy, right? And then you do, if you're just like, oh, I don't like doing this. I don't like organizing interviews. I don't like onboarding. I don't like, it's like, then that's fine. Then now but you've done it in a way where, you've got this Amazon two-way door thing, right? It's like, I can go and sample it, and then I can say, not for me, I'm going to come back, right? Actually, just get me back in the IDE, right? That's great. That's fine. You know what you want to do. Maybe try again in a couple of years. Then there's sort of that next level, which could be what I've seen a few times is trying to do it as a, like, something formal but time limited, right? So let's the good opportunities if people are, go away, or that, you need basically sort of a secondment, someone's on maternity leave, someone's on long-term sick, or we got a new team, which is a temporary team. It's like, can I take over that responsibility for a period of time? Like, as a bit of a trial, right? 3 months, 6 months. And again, we can have some check-in points, and that might lead to a permanent role or a permanent offer. Or it could be, we do this for that 3 months, 6 months, and then we say, well, that was great, thanks very much, I'm going to go back to my old job. So again, you can kind of get that little step without doing that full commitment. And then, of course, there is the, like, applying for a job, going for the whole thing, and then getting that job. The thing is with that is that's kind of one of those, like, one-way. It's not exactly a one-way door decision, but it's like, you've kind of made a commitment. You might have some expectation that you're going to be in this role for a couple of years, and that you're now on this track. So, kind of going in there and then realizing quite quickly, not for me. It's like, now you're impacting other people, you're impacting the business and your teams. So it's like, look for those opportunities where you can have those two-way doors. You can do that try before you buy, and get some of that experience to see if that's something which you like before kind of going for that bigger, more formal commitment.
I love having a chat with your direct manager, because if you're individual contributor right now, and you're likely senior, you have someone you're doing one-to-ones with. Hopefully you have someone that you're doing one-to-ones with. But if you're not, you still have a reporting line to someone, and going in and going like, look, I'm thinking about team leads. I think that's a good career progression for me. I've been, reading books, I don't know, going to conferences, or just preparing somehow. What could I do? Is there something you could give me right now so I can trial all that situation? And just having that conversation and trying to create that opportunity for yourself, it is a lot more healthier than just making that decision yourself and just committing without actually, going through all of that. And I love actually having an interview for it. Like, internally, when people are getting promoted, I think is the easiest to understand how you're going to stack up is just have a proper interview for that role with your manager, or maybe it's like head of engineering or CTO. Just get interviewed, get asked questions of what is needed for that role. And you're going to be like, very quickly, okay, maybe I didn't thought about that, because I have no idea how to answer that question. So, okay, so we made the decision. So let's say our James, our fictional character, made the call. he just went, okay, I want to become a leader of people. I'm going to approach this in the right way. So I'm going to take on some of the responsibilities within that, and I'm going to see how I'm going to be doing with that. So I made that call. What responsibilities should I be looking for as in that like trial mode? Like what is almost like 1-to-1 of what people should expect when they become a leader of people?
So I think different companies will have different types of manager roles, right? And a different balance of how much you're expected to be a hands-on technical person as a manager. So I think the first thing you need to do is really understand the expectations of the role for yourself, right? So speaking to that hiring manager, whether it's inside your company or whether you're interviewing somewhere else, like really understanding like what are the expectations, what are the roles, how much time would I be, writing code? If I'm writing code, am I doing things on the critical path or am I just doing like PRs, right? Or other ancillary non-critical path kind of work. So like really understanding that and making sure that that's, is okay with you. I've been, my first managerial role was at Pivotal Labs, which was, probably 90 to 95% of my time as an engineering manager was being an engineer. And it was no different. It was that extra 5 to 10%, which was like, now I have to go and do, I'm doing one-on-ones, I'm doing some hiring, I'm doing, vacation approvals, I'm doing expenses and some of the administrivia of being a manager. Like they're not the fun, but you need to be done. So that's probably like one end of the scale, right? Where you're still 90% you're still the same role. And then I've seen other roles where now you're a manager, you're not expected to write any code. And you're either still technical and you are doing PRs and maybe you're doing more architecture kind of work, or you are non-technical and you are only doing people management stuff. So this is everything from hiring, onboarding, performance management, reviews, one-on-ones, and that is your job. So I think the first thing is to understand like where, the role which you're applying for, where is it on that spectrum? And is that something that you want? Because those two things which I've just explained are very, very different jobs. And you might want one of them and not the other, or the other way around. So I think that's a really important point. I think once you get beyond that first line manager, I think it does start to change. You become more of that people side, right? And maybe you're doing more of the business side as well, and you start to take on more responsibility. But you're certainly doing less coding. But that's almost like the one step removed. So it's like, are you this little half step engineering manager where you're still an engineer, or is it like a full step? You're not really an engineering manager, you're a manager of engineers.
Do you believe the 2-in-1 roles actually work like that, or not like work like that, but do they actually work in the sense of that they become an actually value add? And maybe I'll give more context. So I've seen that very popular especially in startups where effectively the funds are scarce and it's a sort of like a poor man's solution. Like you're going to be doing 50 of your time coding and you're going to be doing 50 of your time managing. So I call them 2-in-1 roles.
Yeah.
Like in real terms, in your experience, do you think it's a value add or it actually is disfavor to the person doing that 2-in-1?
I think by the time you get to 50-50, it's probably not the right mix, right? Because, anyone who's writing code knows that you want to try and get into that flow state, right? Especially if you're doing something on the critical path, you're doing really important work, like you need time. And if you don't have that time or you're being interrupted, whether that is like intent, like tap on the shoulder, do you have 5 minutes, which is quite common for a manager, right? Or whether it's, I've got a half an hour meeting every couple of hours, like I can't just focus on something. It's really hard, I think, to be on critical path technical work and be doing sort of that people side at that sort of 50-50 kind of ratio. Now, it did work at Pivotal when it was like the 90-10, right? Because a lot of people would carve out, say, an afternoon. So it's quite predictable. So they're four and a half days of the week were totally engineering, and then like an afternoon or a bit would be I'm doing people management stuff on like Wednesday afternoons. So it's very predictable, and it worked. You can make it work, but it worked in that ratio. But I think more than that, then it's like I can't do both jobs. I can't be good at both jobs. So I think at a 50-50, I think would be for something as I think is engineering as a creative role and a problem solving role. I don't think that's the right ratio. If it was something which was more predictable and I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again, maybe. But I think for something which is more creative, like engineering, I don't think that's the right sort of ratio.
I echo the same. Because I mean, my take is like you are in a no man's land where like you don't want to be in a no man's land. You want to be either in a land of engineering where you deepening your knowledge and you're getting the depth of your domain, cloud engineering, back-end developer, front-end developer. You want like the biggest challenges you can get within that domain so you can advance, your technical skills and you sort of just growing your career as a, domain expert. Or you want to be a leader of people and really learn what's a good one-to-one, how to give feedback, how to give praise, how to look at the team compositions, how to understand behavioral science of team compositions and, all of that stuff. If you're trying to do both of them at the same time, which you in the beginning said that's a totally two different jobs, it really is. So if you're trying to overlap them, you're just in a no man's land. You're not becoming a better as engineer, as a coder, as a solution architect, and you're really not becoming a better as a leader of people. You're effectively just managing some flows as a status quo. I have to do this. It's very administrative. You're just sitting in that no man's land, as I call that, and you're not really advancing. So I personally don't like two-in-one roles. I think it's a disfavor to people. So I think if you want to be a leader, be a leader. If you want to be an engineer, be an engineer. If you want to understand where you potentially want to go, as we discussed, maybe there's a good trial to be in that no man's land for an amount of time and just sort of get a flavor of what's waiting, in another room. So, and I think people who never tried management or leadership, and they're coming from this engineering background, one thing which I personally feel like it's being undervalued or underlooked is how distractive a manager role is.
Yeah.
Like you constantly getting asked questions, you constantly, have this fragmented diary of like meetings and this and that. It's very real time-ish. And of course, there's the techniques of how you can sort of protect your diaries and things like that and stack things up. But it's a lot more distracting than just writing code. Like, because if you're coding, you just take a ticket, you put headphones on, you got like 4 hours of concentration, especially now with the remote culture, you're just getting things done. Manager get pulled all the time, all directions, especially middle layer managers. Yeah. So it's just so a lot more distracting, and not everybody can cope with that.
So I think that example I gave at Pivotal, those managers were really just doing a lot of that pastoral care of the individual, right? So it's one-on-ones, timesheets, some of the admin, some of that the people strategy side, which you kind of mentioned, was done by the level above, right? Sort of the director level or senior manager level. So there was that kind of split. So I don't think that was the no man's land. It was kind of a little half step in towards going down that path if you wanted to, but I wouldn't quite place it in that no man's land. But it's still like, there's potential to like develop some, but not like a real well-rounded people leader. If you're only doing 5 or 10%, right, you're just kind of doing some of the tasks on it. So there's that.
Okay. So do you have like one-to-ones, being the beating heart of any successful leader of people? Do you have your own ways of how you like to approach one-to-ones? Like maybe a framework, maybe a process, or maybe just any tactical tips you would share?
So a few things. So I quite like informal one-on-ones as a general rule, but following a structure. So there's an author called Michael Bungay Stanier who's got some books on coaching, and he's got some great formulations of questions to ask, like, what's the challenge you're dealing with right now, and can I help, and some other questions. So kind of like following. So there's a written in pencil kind of set of questions. It's kind of informal. I like to, when meeting with people, I like to kind of get out of the office. Like, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's go grab a coffee, right? Let's walk around the block, or if you've got somewhere nice, like walk by the park or down by the river. Like, try and get out of the building, and just spend a bit of time with people and kind of just get to know them. Kind of just outside the office. So that's kind of what I like. But look, people are very different, right? And I think a lot of it is about not necessarily having a structure, but it's about really understanding how individuals communicate, and how to get them to communicate if they're not kind of natural communicators. Like, I've had people who are, within the first 5 seconds of a one-on-one, they're already like, right, here's my challenges, here's what I'm thinking about, this is what I'm worried about, and you're just like, wow, it's like an open book. Right? It's like, great, you're just telling me everything. I've worked with some people who you'd sort of like, let's go for lunch, find somewhere, like, and you spend 55 minutes of a lunch just talking about stuff, and then they wait for that last 5 minutes just as you're like, right, well, let's get back to the office, and they're like, I've got this thing on my mind, but it takes you like 55 minutes to get to that point where they sort of now are comfortable to tell you the thing which they actually want to tell you, but you kind of have to go through that whole thing. So it's also about, trying to use some of these tools and these frameworks, but understanding which tools and frameworks to use for which people, and which people are how to sort of unlock those people and kind of get them to open up. So that's kind of another, it's, a bit more of a meta skill, right? Just trying to apply that to understanding what's the best one-on-one for this person. I've had also some other ones where it's completely informal. I've had some where we've got like a shared Google Doc, and people will put in notes, they'll continuously put in notes, and then, you're in a meeting, it's like, okay, well, these are things which have been on your mind since last time we met. Or some people do a variation of that, which would be like, the day before or something, you'd be like, these are the 3 things I really want to talk about. Send an email or Slack message or something. So it's really having like a toolbox, and then trying to feel like, what does this person need to get the best out of this time together?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I do feel like it's a little bit maturity element with someone when it comes to being comfortable with one-to-ones, and understanding the value of one-to-ones for them, and how they use their time. I as well had many people who, had the leaders before me, and they know the value of one-to-ones, and they know what, they need to do with one-to-one. So you come in that, and they like, what you basically said as an example, where they go like, here's the things, here's the risks, here's what I need you to do for me, and things like that. And you go like, awesome. That, was easy.
You make my job easy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other side, you have people who potentially never had these one-to-ones. Maybe they just, came to this new organization, and they're coming from something like a startup of like 4 people where this was just not a thing. And they don't really know what that means, that one-to-one. And so you need to almost like coach them for quite some time of why this is their meeting, and this is where they get a lot, done with you. So you're absolutely right. And tailoring yourself to individuals, 100%. So let's say, and this is, going towards another tactical ask. Let's say, I have this, what I call a courageous conversation in my one-to-one, where I want to give a course correcting feedback. Something is, not right. So I want to deliver that constructive feedback, right? How do you go about that? Like, do you have your own ways of how you sort of give a course correcting feedback to someone?
So I think first of all, you need to understand that you understand the context of what's kind of going on. I've seen, not lots, but I've seen sometimes where there's assumptions which are made, and then you kind of go in with some of that kind of course corrective feedback, and then you learn something in that where it's like, oh, there was a reason for that, and I wasn't aware of that, and now we've kind of gone down this path, which is not relevant, or now it might actually backfire. So I think first thing is like, if you're like, I think there's a challenge here. We're not getting getting the performance level or the output or whatever it is. I think the first is kind of going in and like staying curious and asking questions. You know, it's like it could be like, you know, hey, how are you doing? What's up? Like, is there anything, you know, anything on your mind? Anything kind of going on? Like, you know, what's stopping you from having your best day at work? You know, and trying to make sure that you've got that that wider context, and then you know, depending on the type of feedback that you need to kind of give, there are some really good feedback frameworks. So, you know, if you're kind of going into that and you know, potentially it's kind of some level of conflict, like just thinking through some of those things or jotting some of those down, looking at some of those feedback frameworks. So there's, you know, a couple which I continuously go back to. So there's the SBI, which is situation, behavior, impact. So like having that structure of like, okay, well, here's a situation, you know, here's what happened, here's the, you know, the behavior, this is what you did, and this is the impact of that. You know, another one is the nonviolent communication by Rosenberg, I think, and the structure which he has is quite similar, but it talks a bit more about feelings and trying to say like, well, this is how I felt, and you know, it's hard to, it's more subjective, so it's kind of hard for someone to argue against how you feel about something. So like when you did this, I felt like that. You tend to elicit more of a response of like, I didn't really intend that. That wasn't, you know, it wasn't the intention. So there are a couple of different frameworks for different types of feedback that you need to give. But generally, I'd kind of go through that, you know, just think through it in my mind or write something down, and then kind of go and use that as a sort of a bit of a framework, and to have that conversation, right, to kind of tease those things out. So look, they're really important. That SBI is quite a good one because if you take one of those things out, it can be a really negative experience. Yeah. So if you don't have that situation, if you're just like, look, here's your behavior and here's the impact, you might say, but when am I doing that? Like, you know, and if I can't see when I'm doing it, I can't create the sort of an association. So then I can't stop myself from doing it again. Or if you say, like, you know, in this meeting, you had this impact, but if I don't know what I'm doing to cause that impact, then I can't make any correction. And if you're just like, hey, in this meeting, you're doing this thing, and I'd be like, okay, so what? If I don't know the impact, then like I don't know the effect that it's having. So you kind of need all of those three things, and ultimately, and where possible, doing it in like a timely fashion, right? So it's recency. So it's not that thing you did 9 months ago on a Tuesday. It was raining. You remember? No, I don't remember. What are you talking about? You know, so trying to do it like timely and you know, having that association is going to help those individuals to say like, to, you know, place them in that moment in time, give them that, you know, be that explicit, so that they can kind of see that, so they can start to think about what they could do differently. And that kind of corrective things, you know, when it is more behavioral, most of the time people aren't aware that they are doing something which is perceived in a poor way. And most of the time, people are quite receptive to getting that feedback if it's given in a good way. So you just need to make sure that you do that homework to make sure that you're giving it in a sort of professional way. We had something at Pivotal called Ask, which was actionable, specific, and kind. It's like, make it actionable. Tell like, you could be doing this different. Make it specific. Here's the time. Here's a location. Right, and doing it kind, being professional, and not just like, hey, you're just being a, you know, not being a particularly nice person, but like giving it in a kind way, like in a professional way.
I mean, at the end of the day, you are their leader, so your job is to course correct if something is not right, and it's just two individuals talking about how they can better themselves. Of course, you can always deliver in such a poor form that people cage out and they become quite defensive and evasive about, you know, the feedback you're giving. So all these frameworks, you know, are very great. And I personally love to add a thing which is like pattern matching before, you know, you give that feedback. So you talked about the context and understanding what's going on. I love to not engage in, you know, constructive feedback until I have at least a couple of times, ideally it's like 3 times of the same behavior taking place. Yeah. So, you know, it's like it's a real thing, rather than people doing something because they had a bad day, maybe something happened at home, maybe they got caught in the traffic or coming to office, and they just, in general, were quite hyped up, negatively speaking, and they show some bad colors, but it's not a thing. It just came once, disappeared. But if it's constantly repeating itself, then you go like, okay, maybe we should have a chat about that.
There is whilst I agree, I see what you're saying. I would say also that you don't want to let things go on sort of too long, right? And I think if you think about it as like pressure, right? Like pressure builds over time. So if people kind of keep doing things, and there is a behavioral thing, the more you let it go, the more kind of pressure that goes. And when you kind of give that feedback, you could be saying, I've been doing this for 6 months. Why hasn't anyone told me? Right. And then you could kind of get a really adverse reaction. But if you are doing it like, like you come out of a meeting and you could say, hey, James, look, the way that you spoke to, that other person, right, that developer, when you were estimating that story, right, like I think you made them feel like pretty bad, right, because you told them they didn't know what they're talking about. If you can address it quickly, they might be like, yeah, you know what, I just, I got caught up in traffic and I'm kind of, I'm sorry, I should go, and I'm just going to go and say sorry. I didn't like, so you can like nip things. I think if you can nip it in the bud and you can catch it before it becomes an issue, I think there's something to credit there. But I think there's also one of the things as a leader, that, and maybe here's a difference between like managers and leaders, right? Like I think as a leader, you have to get comfortable in in having difficult conversations. You have to be comfortable in working in conflict, right? So whether that's like I have to create conflict and have that hard conversation to give that constructive feedback, I think it's quite a human trait to avoid conflict, and be like, you know what, they probably just had a bad day. They probably just got caught up in traffic. I'll address it next time. I think it's very human to be like, I'm just going to let that one go, and then if it happens again, maybe I'll do that. And I think also for us in the UK as well, it's kind of quite a British sort of cultural thing as well. Like, I don't want to say anything bad. I'll only be nice. But we're actually probably doing a disservice by, being nice and kind are different things. Sometimes being kind is, just saying it like it is, right, and doing it in a timely way. So,
100%.
Yeah. So as a manager, definitely as a leader, getting comfortable with that is hard, but really important. And I think it makes you stand out as a better leader if you're able to do that in a professional way. Mm-hmm. But if you learn to deal with that, you might never enjoy it. But learning to get good at that is going to make you a better leader.
I'm going to go as far as, and I'll say that there's no way you're going to be good at leading people if you're not able to have a courageous conversation and give a course correcting feedback in a way it actually yields results where people accept it and they start bettering themselves. There's just no way you're going to be able to take 8 people, you're leading and make that team stick if you're not addressing what is called a healthy conflict, where you're taking issues with the team, you put it on the table and you discuss it and you sort of try to resolve them. Like if you feel uncomfortable, and it will be uncomfortable maybe all the time, but in the beginning as a fresh leader, that's going to be maybe not the most uncomfortable thing you ever did, but it's going to be quite uncomfortable.
It's going to be up there.
Yeah,
it'll be up there.
Yeah. So you need to go through that, and all these techniques, all these frameworks, they really help. And one thing when it comes to talking about these feedbacks and why I like the pattern matching is that I love the saying of you cannot talk yourself out of a situation you behaved into. Mm-hmm. So when you talk with people about certain situations, the defensiveness often comes out and people try to talk themselves out and they go like, oh, this happened, that happened, it wasn't me, it was something else. Like you can't talk yourself out from a situation you behaved yourself into. So that means there's a behavioral traits within your character which places you in that, anecdotally, that, making someone feel bad when they're doing story sizing and you just sort of say something, you make remarks and you just make others feel stupid, something like that. Like that's something you behaved yourself into. Like that's, you have to take that feedback in silence and really go home and think about that. All right, so we drifted a little bit towards the feedback. All right. So let's go back to the James, who's trying to become, a leader. So before we go and talk a little bit about, what happens in the first year once you sort of come to that role, we have this question, which goes, in the spirit in the show, we have this question, which basically goes like this. If you would choose one piece or one, I'm trying to phrase this now. So what is the most important thing for any tech venture growth? But you can only choose like one thing. Could be action, could be framework, it's like anything. It's just one thing.
So repeat the question. So what's the one thing, the most important thing?
In your view, for any tech venture growth?
For the growth?
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately people are doing the work for now until AI takes over everything, right? People are doing the work. So creating a culture where people can thrive is, as a leader, probably one of the most important things which you can do. Now, how that manifests is going to be different from company to company. But I think really thinking about, like, if I can help people be successful, people are going to do good work, and that's going to feed back into the company being really successful. So I'd say if there's one thing, it's creating that culture. Because you as a leader, if there's only one of you, and even if it's a 5-person company, 20-person company, 1,000-person company, there's only one of you. You're not doing all the work. Other people are doing the work. So creating that culture, and that whether it is the psychological safety, whether it is the sense of mission, purpose, or the values of the company, like those things are important. And if you get that right, will yield the business results that you want at scale, whatever that looks like.
Okay, I love that. People, effectively the lowest denominator within any organization, which is the people. If you make sure they can do great work, as a result, your tech venture grows. That's pretty much what we're saying, right?
Yeah, that and blockchain.
Buy Bitcoin. some adverts. I should play like crypto ads right now.
Yeah.
Buy some Bitcoin. Right. Okay. So jokes aside, back to the main topic, right? So, okay, let's take our fictional character, James. He made a decision. He did the trial. He talked with leadership. He was able to sort of spend some time into no man's land, get a taste of the potential team lead position. He was like, you know what? I really enjoyed it. I really liked to learning about good interview techniques. I developed a sense of what is a good team player. Now I'm working with the teams. I'm doing these one-to-ones. I love helping people. I love achieving results with and through people. I want to stay, and I'm getting a role. So I'm getting a team lead role. How will my first year look like? And we're talking about the differences between what I left behind, which is the individual contributor, and I'm now walking into this leader of people room.
Yeah.
Like how that room looks like for me in that first year.
Yeah. So there's a book which I really like. It's quite dense, but it's called The Leadership Pipeline. And it has this visualization of like a series of turns that you have to make throughout your career. And really what we're talking about here is in the parlance of this book is the first turn. So you're going from managing yourself to managing others. That's the first thing. Now, a lot of people, when they make this transition, don't realize that it can require a change of skill, a change of time management, potentially a change of values, right? And kind of how you do business, whatever that is. A lot of people, they get promoted into a new role, but they carry on doing their old role. They don't actually make that transition. So I think the first thing is really to understand, like, it is a change of role, right? It's a different job, and that different job has different. You need to learn new skills. You need to think about how you manage your time differently. You might have a change of values or set of behaviors which need to change. So I think it's really trying to get to grasps with that. I think some of the things which will change is likely is the need to collaborate with different people, either across the organization in different roles. So maybe as an IC, you're used to just working with engineers. Maybe you're also maybe you're product manager, maybe designer, but probably you're just used to working with engineers. But once you kind of get into that leadership position, now you start, you might have to start working with product marketing or with sales or with others, right? And so trying to build those bridges, build those relationships, understand their needs, right? And you might have been, as an engineer, you might have been like, oh, sales, they're always just like shoving really unrealistic requirements into our backlog. But now you're like, now I go into a manager, I can fix that. And then now you realize like, oh, actually, look, they've got really big problems as well, right? Quotas and pressures and everything. So starting to acquire that empathy for those individuals and those roles, and, building those relationships is really important. Managing up is a really important skill as well, right? As an engineer, you might have had an engineering manager who was really protective of you, and you kind of created this amazing environment, a bit like a bubble. But now you're outside of that bubble, or you're outside of that umbrella. You don't have that layer of protection anymore. So you kind of need to kind of go and talk to maybe the senior management. Maybe you need to kind of go and talk to customers more, right? You need to tell them that something's going to be late, or the issue which is in production is not fixed yet. So there's more communication skills which need to be learned, and sort of both the conciseness and how you present messages, and especially how you present bad messages, how you build those collaborative relationships. It becomes much less about code and much more about like human to human interactions.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned the bubble of protection. I think that's probably going to get felt. At least it was for me. We're talking about fictional James, but now I'm just reflecting on my own experience. Yeah. The realization of how you think about projects coming in, the requirements you're getting, not being clear, not enough, and getting annoyed with that, and all these things. Once you're that on the other side, you do realize that someone else is doing the best they can as well.
Yeah.
And that is the best form they can give you, because they don't get things from like sales, and sales didn't ask. And it's really like this big chain reaction, and you start developing that realization or empathy towards these other processes. I do think that people who actually team leads who protect their teams too much actually doing this favor. I know that this sometimes happen, and I think there's a notion about like they don't need to know about these things. They need to concentrate on coding. I have a different approach. I mean, I don't like protecting people too much. I think it's more about really explaining them the whys, and allowing the team to think about the hows. Because if you start protecting them from everything, they lose the connection with the context, and that's where that frustration actually comes in play. Because they just don't know why requirements are shit like that, and they start filling those gaps with their own ideas, which sometimes can be, a big disfavor. So I actually lean towards like, look, here's the situation, here's a big why between, but behind what I'm asking. You go now figure the how, and you sort of, don't have that bubble, or that bubble doesn't appear. Just a side note. So, relationship, I think, and do you agree, is you are in a relationship game now. Like if you are a leader of people, you're going to be building relationships. Is going to be like a very important thing to think about. Do you have your own ways of managing up, and managing your peers, or managing down as well? Like some tactical tips of how you can manage up.
So for managing up, just being very clear in your ask. So in my experience, when you're trying to manage up, you're trying to push something up. The person who you're trying to talk to is generally, let's say, like they're generally very supportive of the work which you're trying to do. But they are probably quite time poor. So, and again, trying to understand that like change of like time and values and the work. If you don't have an appreciation of what's different about that person's role compared to what yours are, you're probably going to try and meet them on the same level that you are. So you could be like, oh, well, let's book an hour meeting so I can walk you through this thing. And it's like, I don't have an hour, right? Can we just grab can you give 5 minutes? Just tell me what do you need? And I think I've seen it a couple of times where people fail to kind of see that, and they'll kind of go and they'll go and present to leadership and executive, and they'll come out and they'll be really frustrated. They'll be like, I didn't get what I wanted. And then you say to them, you didn't make what you wanted clear. And you left that ask way too late. So I think just a general thing for managing up, what I've seen is make sure that what you're asking for is clear, and you ask it kind of early, and then you kind of say, do you need more detail on that? So you might say, look, I need, we need some budget. We need to hire. We need to go and do this thing. And do you need to know why? Do you need some more context? And if they say, yeah, well, that's a big ask. I need to understand more about that before I approve it. Great, I've got that information ready for you. But if they're just if you go and say, it's the equivalent of I need £2 for something. Here, it's £2. Go away. Leave me alone. I've got other things to do. And you're like, great, I've got what I needed. So it's really about trying to understand, making it concise, probably putting your ask up front quite early, just making it very clear, and just trying to have an appreciation of the difference of what that person's day looks like and how busy they are. And so I think that's something which I've kind of seen a few times that I think is useful for managing up.
It's just remembering probably how your diary changed, going from individual contributor to becoming a team lead or something higher, in general becoming a leader or a manager. And we're using this interchangeably, effectively. I mean, there's a slight difference between leading people and managing, but it's very often that the best leaders go through some segment of their careers of doing just pure management. If you empathically remember yourself, you're going to be like, okay, well, that room looked totally different. My diary just lit up as a Christmas tree compared to when I was individual contributor. Now it's just meetings, calls, and all that. So now if you're managing up, think about the same. They probably have even worse than you do.
Yeah. So I kind of like to think of it as make it easy. If you're asking me for something, it's make it easy for me to say yes.
Yeah.
It's here's the thing. I need this. Can you help? Yes. Great. There you go. On to the next. If you kind of come and you're like, right, well, I've got this thing and here's some background and I want to hear and what happens. And you're just why are you still talking? What do you need? What do you need?
Yeah.
So I think it's just clear, concise, get to the ask quickly. And then, they'll either say, yes, that's fine, carry on. Or they'll say, I need more information, right? It's a big ask, it's a big commitment, or I don't understand it, right? And then they'll pull more out from you, I think.
Yep. I love that.
In terms of the peers, I think that is where you just it's more classical, just relationship building. It's just hey, great to be working with you. Can we go and grab a coffee? Can we get some lunch? Right. Let's just try and get to know each other a bit on a human level. And I'd love to understand what's your day look like? What keeps you up at night? Right. I just want to, try and build that empathy towards those people to get those relationships. I think that's kind of more key at that point. And then when you understand each other on that human to human level, then when you kind of go into all right, now we're going to go, let's do some business. You're building on that foundation of having pretty strong relationship already.
I echo that very strongly. I tend to never skip a lunch or do a lunch alone. Sometimes, of course, it happens, but I always try to fill in a lunch and go with someone, with my peer.
I find it very hard to turn down a meeting that's got food in it.
There you go. I'm not buying it though. It's you buy your own lunch, but we're gonna have it together. So we're gonna, be humans and chit chat about, the best TV shows you watched or kids or whatever will resonate with, and it's just gonna be that human connection. And then I do love to ask a question of how can I help you?
Yeah. Because
when it comes to the peers, you're gonna be very closely connected. If you team lead for a certain team, that team will have deliverables, which, some product manager will depend on, some, head of delivery will depend upon. Maybe there's some other team leads, and you're sharing some spaces in code repositories and things like that. There's always, interconnectivity, and asking that question, you're effectively giving them permission to, share those dependencies, and just knowing them, not necessarily you go and do something about that because you're probably busy with other things. But just realizing where your indirect influence towards others comes from, you can always think about either avoiding or actually, double downing on that help. So that's very healthy as well. So what we have, Robbie? We have like feedback, one-to-ones, managing up, managing down, just building relationships. That's definitely coming like, the first month you in that role, but that's your first year. So undoubtedly, there's a lot more things, and someone in that role would benefit from coaching to get that role done well. Do you have any advices or tactical tips of how a newly positioned leader, fresh leader, could get either external or internal help, mentoring towards just being a better leader of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be, inside your company, right? Of having like trying to find some peer support. So maybe if you're a manager, like finding another manager who you can go for lunches with, right? And maybe someone who's in a different part of the business. I mean, maybe they're still an engineering manager, but maybe they're like in a different group working on something else, right? So you get a level of abstraction away from what you're doing. So you're not necessarily talking about details of the job. You can be talking a bit more about like the people challenges and a bit of a higher level. So I think there's definitely that. Just do that. Go and talk with the other managers. Work with your people department, your HR department, and ask them. Right? They it's funny as a people manager. Quite a lot of people don't actually go and talk to the people in the people team and the HR team and just say like, well, what support is there? Like, are there courses? Are there coaching things? The 360s are really effective, right? So maybe they've got programs. Maybe they work with partners. Like when I was at Pivotal as a director, I got put on a program which was similar to that, where I got a coach and we did 360 feedback, and then they kind of gave me that back to me, and it was really instructive. So that was something which was organized through the company, and they ran it for all of people in a similar management roles across the company. This is probably a few thousand people at this point, so it's more cost effective to run it as a program than as individuals. But of course, as an individual, you can still reach out and try and find coaches and mentors outside of the business as well. Just yourself. Again, you could work with your manager, you could work with someone in the people team. There are a number of coaching communities, either people advertising directly, or I work with organizations like CTO Craft, right? They've got a list of coaches. You can get in touch with them, and they'll try and match you with someone who's good fit, and based on what you're looking for in your career and the type of company you work for. So you can kind of get matched up, and then you have a relationship with that external person. So yeah, lots of opportunities there, I think, for people if they go out and look for it and ask for it.
I do love the external one for one simple reason. I feel like there's no bias baked into it. It's like so I'm not diminishing the internal mentorship by any means.
I think you should do the internal one anyway.
Yeah,
it's an and, not an or, I think.
Yeah, here you go. Like you have that, you will have your one-to-ones with your, that direct line, and you will be giving your own one-to-ones or having your own one-to-ones with, managing down. So you will have your own one-to-ones. It might be just that it's going to be much shorter. Maybe it's half an hour. Well, you have like 45 minutes to an hour with your own, team, depending. But you will definitely have that, and you can always ask the questions which bugging you of how to become better. Sometimes though, it's like when you walk into this new career, and it is a new career, it's very, very different. You don't really know what to ask until you are in the situation. So if you want to be proactive, maybe you're going to buy a book which tries overview that that first year or couple of years of that management, and it'll give you some tips. Then you can sort of try to ask these questions, and that's why I really like external coaching. Like they don't have any sort of like biases baked in. There's no politics. There's no like, I don't know that person, so I have no opinion about that, so I'm not going to be withholding anything. It's just like, look, here's a theory of leadership, like boom, boom, boom. You get all that knowledge given to you, and then, you can just sort of go through your weeks and have these sessions. Of course, external, being paid ones, not everybody buys into it, but I personally felt and got a lot more value from external leadership than internal in all occasions I've personally had. Okay, so we got that, and I'm doing well now. I have my team and all of that, and then it's just like new career path, and now you're just gonna grow, and you're gonna get more people, and maybe eventually you're gonna become a leader of leaders and things like that. That of course is is totally another sort of episode. But before we finish, Robbie, one last question is: do you have any sort of stories to share where you've been with someone, and maybe that's yourself, where someone went through that journey, which we just discussed, and on reflection, there's like one thing or couple of things which very clear was done as a mistake, and if you would go back, you would go like, I wish someone told me that that's not what you do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's I don't know, it's a very open question. I don't know, I can't think of any one thing. I think maybe there's some of the patterns though. I think I see quite often US businesses who sort of just copy and paste the US culture and policy onto especially European organizations, and then are surprised when things don't work out.
Doesn't stick.
It doesn't stick, or there's friction, or surprise. It's like employee contracts are very different in Europe than they are in the US. So I think mistakes, but that's more of a kind of like real executive leader of just kind of making assumptions, or just not even trying, just like we'll just do the same thing over here, and not doing any kind of localization, or really understanding the market and individuals. But there's quite a bit of a more of a a meta one, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. You talked about we talked about the bubble earlier as well. I think there's another pattern there of being overly protective of individuals, right? And then being surprised when you have to kind of give some bad news. Then they're all surprised of like, I didn't realize it was that bad, And it's like, yeah, it's been really bad for months. I've just been protecting you,
Here's the redundancies now.
Yeah, we're out of business. What?
Yeah.
So I think there's there's different angles. Yeah, it's kind of hard to think about one that's kind of really relevant at the, hopefully if you're at that manager level, at the first line manager level, hopefully you've got enough protection from your peers and your own manager to stop anything really bad happening, and any mistake. And you will make mistakes, and that's okay because you learn from mistakes. But hopefully your mistakes are like limited in their sort of size.
Exactly. Hopefully you have a manager who will give you that feedback we talked about in that one-to-one, and you're like, look, you're making a bad calls over here.
Yeah.
And here's how you could do that. Then, I'll coach you through that, or here's another person who can coach you through that. And that's a good feedback loop, which allows you to grow. Yep.
So like maybe one thing is like not asking for help actually, and thinking that you can do it yourself. And then if you don't ask for help, if you don't share that with your manager, and you just take action sort of unilaterally, which potentially is inconsistent with the rest of the organization, that's when you can kind of get into trouble. So, if you're in that first line report and you're not sure, ask for help. There's no penalty. No one will think any less of you for asking for help, right? I think probably the inverse. You'll probably be like, thank you for asking for help. It's good that you asked that, because we have this new policy, which we haven't told you about yet, that you're going to do this thing. And I've seen that manifest through potentially people implementing sort of a policy, their own interpretation of a policy. So I don't know, say it was like, can I take some time off to go to a dentist appointment or something? It's like, oh, look in the rule book. The rule book says no, so no, you can't do it. Versus let me just ask my boss, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, that rule book. Yeah, don't worry about that. That's not really relevant. So it's ask for help, or the error is not asking for help, I guess.
Yep, I love that actually. That's a very good shout. We had a couple of people in historical episodes. We had Rob, who's a head of IT. We had as well Craig, who's a CTO for a law firm. And in those two episodes, they basically were like, the smartest people are the ones who actually acknowledge they don't know things and ask for help from others in the team. It's just so simple, but just for whatever reason, our human nature is like, I'm not going to tell that I don't know things. I'm going to try to solve it myself. Maybe, I'll read books or Google or whatever. It's like, you got people around you. Everyone are willing to help. Just reach out. So that's a very good shout. That's a very good shout, Robbie. And where I was going with this question, by the way, is myself. I remember when I stepped into it, I never went through any education. And it was very quick for me because I came to a business to interview for a senior role.
Mm-hmm.
And I left being offered a team lead role. So I made this jump too quick. So I walked into that team lead role as a senior developer. So I just micromanaged everything.
Yeah.
And my understanding of helping people was doing things for them.
Yeah.
And just telling them how to do things. So I spent like first 6 months of just doing basically a very poor leadership role. But it's good that I had a good CTO who basically just had a chat with me and went like, that's not how you do it. So this is where we finished today.
All right.
Thanks everyone to listening, and thanks Robbie to coming in. And hopefully that was, as pleasurable for you as it was for me.
Oh, it was great. Thanks for making this happen. No, we've been talking for 7 or 8 months to get this to work. So glad we could finally make it work.
Here you go. I'm glad as well, Robbie. So thanks for coming again. Thanks everyone for listening. See you next time.
All right. See you.